So what is the best way to get to know your Warhammer 40k army? Today I'm going to share 5 of my best tips. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, today I'm going to share 5 tips on the best way for you to learn your Warhammer 40k army. Before that though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so in this video I want to run over 5 of my tips that I've learned over the years on how to get used to your army. So let's start off with tip number 1, play the same list. Okay, so you have your army, you have your list, you play a game, and then the next game comes along and you want to try a different list, and then the next week you want to try a different list. That is not how to do it. What you need to do is have your list and play that list all the time. Now there's nothing wrong with maybe exchanging out one of the units or possibly even 2 units, but you want to keep your core list exactly the same each time you play. Playing that list each time you play will really help reduce the learning curve for those particular units. Even if you're not using maybe the best units, at least you are getting used to the army. Now as you're playing this same list, you're going to be able to see where the weaknesses are, maybe which units you should be adding to the list for the future, which units you should be buying and painting next, etc. It's a really good learning tool to play the same list for a good few games. Okay, so let's go on to point number 2, make notes. Oh, that reminds me, don't forget to stay to the end of the video for my bonus power tip. Okay, so making notes. Now I know lots of people do like to take notes during the game, maybe on how particular units perform, etc. I'm not really talking about that. What I'm talking about is making notes of your special rules, stuff that you don't want to forget. Now what I do at the top of my army list, I highlight in a colour all of the stuff that I need to do before the game starts, before the turn starts, and then maybe in the movement phase or the psychic phase or the shooting phase, have little notes, points of stuff that I don't want to forget. So in the Necron case I would have a list down of don't forget to do reanimation protocols, don't forget to do mine will be done, don't forget to generate a scarab on your scarab swarms, etc. Have them listed at the top of your list, and before each turn begins, read through them, remembering what you need to do. Very, very valuable. The last thing you want to do is forget a special rule. Okay, so point number 3, don't play to win. Okay, so of course we all like to win, but when you're playing with a new army, you really can't expect to be winning from the off. It's got to take you time to get used to your army, to get used to the rules, and to learn how the army plays. So in those first games, probably 10, 20 games, you really shouldn't have any expectations on actually trying to win with the army. What you should be doing is focusing on the actual army and how it's playing on the table, learning the army, learning how the units interact with each other, learning how you can win each particular mission that you're playing, and take all the information in. Basically gather as much information as you can during those first games. You're basically just play testing the army, and then over time you will become very familiar with that army, and then you can start to come up with your own tactics and focusing on winning. But don't play to win from the beginning. Okay, now this brings me nicely on to point 4, never give up. Okay, so we're trying to learn our army as best we can, and one way to do this is to never give up. Regardless of how badly you're losing, just carry on. In actual fact, find something on the table you want to try. Focus in on a particular thing to happen on the table. It could be something quite simple, like my warriors are going to get into combat with those Terminators. Yes, they might have thunder hammers, but I don't care. I want to see that happen. I want to learn how well that goes. Sometimes you'll do things that you would never think of doing in a real game, and actually the results can be quite different to what you expect. So never give up, just keep learning, and one day you might find yourself in a tournament situation where you're coming to turn 4 or 5 and you're scrambling for points, and this experience of dogging it out to the end of the game could come in really handy. Okay, so let's go straight on to tip number 5, learn from your opponent. Now of course it depends on the gaming environment that you're at. Sometimes if you're playing a nice friendly game, you could actually ask your opponent at the beginning of the game, what do you think of my army? Is there anything there that scares you? Do you have any concerns when facing this army? Now of course if it's just a pick-up game with maybe a stranger at the gaming store, you might not be able to do that. However, when you're playing against your opponent, you can also learn there as well. You can learn what your opponent does against your army, how they deploy against your army, where do they set up objective markers against your army. There is so much to learn from what your opponent does, and that's even without speaking to them. So as well as taking mental notes about how your army is performing, try to make mental notes how your opponent is playing against your army and how your opponent's army performs against yours. And then when it comes to the end of the game, that is the time to ask your opponent as well, what did you think of my army? How do you think I played the army? Would there be anything different that you would have done with my army? Get some feedback. The chances are your opponent probably would have spotted something that maybe you didn't think. Something that could have potentially scared him about your list that you didn't think was that scary. It's very, very interesting to get an idea of what your opponent thought of your army. Now another thing that I like to do as well while I'm playing the game is walk around to my opponent's side and have a look at my army from his point of view. How scary would my army look to him? It's quite interesting. Your army looks a lot different from the other side of the table. Try it next time you play. Okay, so now it is time for the bonus power tip, and I'm really hoping this is going to be useful to you. Okay, so this is my best tip to help you become really good with your army. You will become very, very competent with your army if you ignore war gear options. So when you're first starting to play, don't take all of the upgrades, just use your units as base. The idea is, as you play, you can see which war gear options you need, which ones you don't. There's a big danger of taking lots and lots of war gear on your units, then never using them, but you just sort of get into a habit of taking the war gear options anyway. I find that if you take no war gear options at the beginning when you're just learning the army, you can easily see along the way, and don't forget you're not trying to win, you're trying to learn in those first games. You can easily see along the way which things you need and which things you don't. Not only that, if you can become a very good player without those war gear options, imagine how good of a player you could be once you start taking that war gear. That is my advice. Become a competent player without the war gear, and then become a powerful player with the war gear. Right, that's it for this video. I hope it was useful. Beam me up.